The year was 1956. The place, Las Vegas, Nevada. Elvis Presley was to make his first Vegas appearance at the New Frontier Hotel and Casino in April. Colonel Parker had booked Elvis, Scotty Moore, Bill Black, and DJ Fontana for a 2-week engagement at the New Frontier. It began on April 23rd. Well, it's hard to believe, but Freddie Martin and his orchestra were the headliners of the show, with Shecky Green on the undercard. Elvis Presley was billed as an added attraction. Yes, I repeat, the king of rock and roll was an added attraction. Back in 1956, Vegas attracted an older crowd. They didn't really know how to handle the king of rock and roll and his gyrating hips. Yes, the old crowd, well, they met Elvis with a cool reception. They politely applauded, but for all intents and purposes, Elvis Presley failed on his first appearance in Las Vegas, Nevada. Elvis and the crew knew that they were going to be in for a long 2 weeks. DJ Fontana would later remark that the old people were just not ready for Elvis. In fact, they did a show for the teenagers on a certain Saturday, and it was jam-packed and everyone was screaming and hollering. Yes, only the young people at the time understood who Elvis was and what he represented. Elvis closed out his performance on May 6, 1956. It would be 13 years before Elvis would make it to Las Vegas again and perform at the International Hotel and Casino. So let's have a time capsule recap. He curled his lips, he swiveled his hips, and he howled like a hound dog. But the crowd in the Venus Room could care less. Yes, those old fogies couldn't wait to get back on the dice table, make a bet on the roulette table. They did not know what they were looking at. For Elvis Presley, it was his first Vegas gig, and he made a measly $17,000. Yes, the New Frontier would book the king of rock and roll for 2 weeks for a measly $17,000. No wonder Elvis Presley was trying to pick the wallet of his manager, Colonel Parker. One thing about Elvis, he always kept his sense of humor. But fortunately for Elvis, he had just released his first album, self-titled Elvis Presley, and it sold more than 362,000 copies in 2 months. It would eventually go on to sell more than 1 million copies. Yes, and Elvis Presley had just signed a 7-year movie contract, and he was going to get $1 million a movie contract. Yes, Elvis Presley made a note in his mind there. After performing to an ungrateful audience like that, he said he didn't want to do nightclubs ever again, and who could blame him? Quite frankly, Elvis Presley did not need smoke-filled nightclubs with over-the-hill clientele eating lukewarm chicken cordon bleu and watered-down cocktails. No, he didn't need it at all. And one local wise guy quipped back then that booking Elvis Presley in front of a crowd like that was like bringing a jug of corn liquor to a champagne party. And always ever so popular with the ladies, one must never forget how generous a man Elvis Presley was. Like I mentioned before, Elvis did a special Saturday afternoon matinee show for the teenagers on April 28th. And here's the thing. He let them have the show for a mere $1. And that included a free soft drink. Yes, Elvis Presley was a generous man. Of course, Liberace was performing at the Riviera at the same time, and he attended an Elvis show with his brother George. Afterwards, they went backstage to ham it up for the press. Here you have Liberace and his brother George. Elvis was having a grand old time. And it is worth mentioning that Elvis Presley was only a tender 21 years old at the time. He was just a baby. At 21, Elvis Presley was just getting started. 13 years later, he would end up back in Las Vegas in 1969, where he would perform more than 800 consecutive sold-out shows at the International Hotel and Casino, and he would be a legend for all times. He would change Las Vegas forever. And of course, Scotty Moore, Bill Black, and DJ Fontana would not return with Elvis on his 1969 comeback performances. No, by that time, Elvis had the Memphis Mafia watching over him. Welcome back to the Hidden Spotlight Treasures collection. We have found some more Elvis Presley photos for you. Some of these have not been seen in a long time. Pretty soon you'll be coming up on some black and white photos. I'll give you a little basic information before we get to the black and whites. So Elvis broke onto the scene in the 1950s like a shooting star. He made records for the Sun Records, and the rest was history. But then in the 1960s, after a stint in the Army, he did a bunch of movies, and the movies started to lose their luster after a while. He made about $1 million a movie, but he was not getting a whole lot of support in the movies. And then it happened in 1969, the comeback in Las Vegas. So the pictures you're going to be seeing here are from the Elvis Presley comeback, 1969. So, Colonel Parker negotiated a deal with International Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. Elvis would be paid $500,000 for 4 weeks of shows, and the hotel was still under construction. He would use a backup band by the name of TCB, short for Taking Care of Business. The lead guitarist was James Burton. And then they had John Wickerson, piano player Larry Muhobrecht. Now this comeback in Las Vegas was extremely important for Elvis Presley, and he was extremely nervous. Yes, he was in shape, and he used his karate moves, and he bounced around the stage like never before. He exhausted himself. He wore himself out because he knew that this had to be the best performance ever. His comeback was the most important thing to him. He knew prior in the 1950s, he was a failure in Las Vegas. People don't realize that the first time Elvis came to Las Vegas, he failed because the crowd back in the 50s were not ready for Elvis. Elvis was way, way before his time. But this was the comeback of the century. Elvis put it all out there. He used his karate moves. Like I said, the fans had never seen anything like this before. And not only the fans, there were big stars there, from Fats Domino to Dick Clark, Pat Boone, Paul Anka. Every Las Vegas headliner was there. Nobody was going to miss this. And Elvis gave them what they came to see. Some people say that his music from the late 60s was the best work he ever created, and I am one of them who believe it. When you look at songs like If I Can Dream and the American Trilogy, yes, when you look at that performance, some people say that it's the best performance ever known to mankind. The American Trilogy. That song was made for Elvis. Yes, he was the king, and many songwriters and the performers that came after him said that they would not be here if it had not been for the king. Quite frankly, no one has had more influence on the world than Elvis Presley.